Welcome to Conscious Co-Creations, straight talk about mind, body, business, spirit, interconnection. And we are here with Intention Radio, and I have a wonderful guest with me today, Victoria Reynolds, and we're going to be talking about religion versus spirituality. And I'm really excited about this conversation. Welcome, Victoria.
Thanks, Carly. I'm thrilled to be here.
So you and I have had many discussions about this subject, and not on radio, however, just being together. And so, I know you've written several books, and I'd love for you to actually just share with us a little bit about your personal views on the difference between religion and spirituality.
Okay. It took me a while to figure out what the difference is. Personally, for a long time in my life, I had lumped them together like I think a lot of other people do, particularly people who were raised in religion. I was raised in a very fundamentalist religion, and what I was taught was that any spirituality outside of our particular religion, outside of our religious context, was considered evil. And the only way that I could access any kind of spirituality was through my religion. So when I walked away from religion a few years ago, actually about 25 years ago, I lumped religion and spirituality into the same group and wanted nothing to do with either one. Then a couple of years ago, I started discovering that there were things in me that were missing, that I never considered spirituality. For example, gratitude. Gratitude is a principle that I live my life by. Turns out that gratitude is spirituality, and it has absolutely nothing to do with religion. However, our religions have attempted to claim ownership of things such as spirituality, faith, trust, hope. Those are spiritual concepts that exist completely outside of religion. And when we learn how to align ourselves with that, well, we no longer need that middleman.
Well, what would you say? I know a lot of people think they need to go to a church, a temple, a mosque to practice religion. And for me, I know that I can pray in my bed. I can chant at home. I can do a lot of things that are what I would context in religion, if you will, in that pod. And I find more and more people are realizing that you don't need to go to a mosque or a temple or a church to practice, if you will, that aspects of religion. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on that? I think there's a way. I always like the terminology of bridging, if you will, like bridging the East and the West. I still think you can find pieces of religion that you grew up with, and I don't think we need to. It's kind of like throwing the baby away with the bathwater. Right. I still think there's some aspects of religion or pieces of religion that we grew up with. I'll give you an example. I grew up Catholic. And the prayer, Our Father who art in heaven and hell, I never liked that terminology. So since I was a child, I changed it to Our Father who is everywhere. I never liked, so it's kind of like Our Father who is everywhere, because I don't really think there's like one Father, if you will. So right. I think we can take aspects of religion and find ways that resonates for us, whatever that is, and then play with that and then do something with that. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm inclined to agree. One of the things that for me was that God doesn't live in a building. So
exactly.
So you don't have to go to a building to find God. God is everywhere. God is in everything. And you can pray in the shower. Shower is actually a really great place because you get really good flow in the shower. So it doesn't have anything to do with the building per se. And a lot of times when we're following someone else's belief, we're not in alignment with our own truth. So I love what you did as a child and created your own prayer that works for you. I think what happens with a lot of people is that they tend to follow other people's dogma and other people's beliefs. And even though it might not resonate with them, they follow those beliefs because they feel like they have to. There's some kind of guilt associated with that. And every single one of us has our own truth. So the key to really connecting with Spirit, connecting with God, is to follow what that truth is for you personally. Because every one of us is on a unique journey, and every one of us, our soul is evolving differently. And the other thing that's interesting for me is what I see with religion is they're classes that we're taking in a sense. you may take the Catholic class. I took the fundamentalist Mormon class. So they're just classes that we're taking in different aspects of spirituality. The other advantage that people have with religion or with church, quite honestly, is community. I think a lot of people go to church because there's a community that they can align with. And community is a beautiful thing. You know, I have my Facebook community.
Now, what you said there, I think, is exactly one of the fundamental pieces. People, by nature, seek community. We're people that seek connection, and connection comes through a community. And you're right, Facebook is a community. And I think, again, technology has brought a lot of people closer together, and technology has also brought a lot of people further apart. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine from Hawaii just wrote on her wall today, you know, what is it with people and technology? Do we not talk to each other anymore? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are texting and emailing. They're not picking up the phone and talking to each other anymore. And as a matter of fact, divorce is on the rise because of the internet. People are spending more and more and more time on the internet, and less time talking to each other as spouses in their home.
Yep.
So we do need to actually find the balance of communicating with one another. So I do agree with you that church or community is why a lot of people do go seek out churches, because of community. And I think that we need to find other ways of seeking community if you're going to a church solely for that.
Right.
You know, like you and I have had other discussions about religion is fear. Religion is fear-based. When you're telling somebody that if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're going to hell, that is a fear-based proposition, if you will. I don't think telling a child when they're 2 and 3 years old, again, the whole barter system, that if you don't do this, you're going to go to hell, or if you don't do this, I'm taking away this, is actually going to instill in a child them telling you the truth. They're going to lie to you because they know they're going to get punished. I'd rather have a child come to me and tell me the truth than a child being in fear of telling me the truth, because if they tell me the truth, they're going to get punished. And you know, because you have 2 children. So what is your experience with that?
I completely agree. I actually have spoken about that in the past as causing a soul trauma. It really traumatizes children when they're really small. And it, even though I think the intention is to teach children morality, I think it does exactly the opposite, because it causes so much fear in children that they can't have an open communication, open, loving communication with their parents or with the people around them, strictly out of fear. And what happens is that we go through life making the choices that we make based in fear rather than in love. And when we teach through love, which is positive reinforcement, and teaching morale, you know, real great spiritual principles such as truth, that, and it's the same thing with me. I teach my children, just tell me the truth. You'll get in a lot less trouble if you tell me the truth than if you lie about it. So my kids get in trouble if I find out they've been lying. If they tell me the truth, they get hugs and kisses for being honest with me. That opens the lines of communication for a child for the rest of their life. And so it's a matter of teaching our religions how to teach love rather than fear.
And it's interesting because you would think that the whole point of church is to teach love and compassion, yet I find that church actually teaches more fear than it does love and compassion.
Right.
And I find that to be very fascinating. And I find, and what I do want to touch upon, though, because we're actually talking about religion versus spirituality, one of the things I really want to reach out to the spirituality community is we also need to get away from being so woo-woo, because one of the disservices the spiritual community is doing that is that we are actually pushing people away from the spiritual community. In other words, we were brought here to have the physical experience. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So if we're telling people just pray, meditate, you know, and it all arrive, we're also doing a disservice. And that's what I'm talking about, bridging the East and the West. We need to actually teach spiritual things in a very grounded, applicable way. And we're just telling people, oh, just pray and chant, close your eyes, and love, 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 and it all arrive. You know, it's like, that's why we have so many people going, oh, I don't want anything to do with that woo-woo stuff.
Right.
It's like, we need to communicate in words that people can understand. A lawyer and a doctor and people that are more business-oriented don't want anything to do with that. And as a matter of fact, when I used to run my center back east, and it was a wellness, you know, it was a mind, body, spirit center. I was written up in the paper, and my clients were very business people, and one of my clients were actually embarrassed to say we used to own. Like literally, they're like, when they would come into the center, before we do anything, so I wanted to clear their mind from their office situation when they would arrive. They would walk in, everything was barefoot, and we would sit in a circle, and yes, we would own. And so when they got interviewed for the paper, they were like, I don't tell when they'd go back to the office and people would ask, what do you do there? And they were embarrassed to say that's what they did. So they would find other ways to say, well, we would meditate or clear our minds. They'd find other words to use. You know what I'm saying? So we need to find words that we can use that everybody can hear us. Right. And I would use words that were different. I wouldn't sit there and say, okay, now let's, ohm type of thing, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You've been with me enough to know that I'm not that type of person. Right. Do I come across to you as like the woo-woo, like,
No.
Right, you know what I mean? It's like, so I think that's so important because I really want the spiritual community to bring more people along with us. It's kind of like being the spiritual warriors, if you will, have a little more warrior energy. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And part of that is, again, there's this separation between the physicality and the spirituality, and what we're trying to do is really merge the two, really integrate spirituality into the physical experience. Part of that stems from the religious belief that we've had, which is, again, that spirituality and religion are separate. If we go back to some of the core beliefs, such as carnal nature, being your physical nature, your carnal nature being evil, and that you can't be physical and spiritual at the same time. Part of our religion beliefs have been that in order to be spiritual, we had to transcend being a physical person, and that you couldn't be both. So part of that is really rethinking even those beliefs within religion itself, that you don't have to go sit under a tree or out in the desert for 40 days and transcend being a human being to be able to have a spiritual experience. A part of it also is understanding that for me, spirituality is synonymous with energy. Spirit is energy. And when we understand that spirit is energy, we can be in the energy of gratitude, the energy of love, the energy of compassion, and that actually is part of the physical experience. We don't have to go out into la la land to have a spiritual experience. It's right here in our physical body, in our everyday presence, just by the energy that we carry ourselves in. And there's this kind of misperception that you can't be both, and it's time to just integrate the two. So that is my thought on, and spirituality does have kind of a new agey thing about it. If you're not spiritual in your church, if you're trying to be spiritual outside of religion, then you're a new age wacky woo. Unfortunately, here in Southern California, it's pretty normal, but I think the rest of the country kind of still thinks those Californians are wacky. And so it really is learning how to bring your spiritual experience into your physical reality, into your everyday life, and teach other people how to be a spiritual person in your office, on the telephone. It doesn't have you don't have to be separate. So.
And welcome back here with Victoria Reynolds and Carly Alyssa Thorne on intentionradio.com. So, Victoria, you were saying some beautiful things there about bridging the two. We were talking about spirituality and religion. So can you go back and explain a little bit more of what you were talking about?
About bridging?
Yes, the bridging.
Okay. That really is understanding that, again, that spirit is energy, and that when we live in the energies of love and light, truth, compassion, healing, forgiveness, all of those have kind of been sold in religion as spiritual concepts that exist completely outside of religion, and we can choose any time to carry ourselves in that spirit. When we realize that that's what spirituality is, there is no separation. It is just who we are. We live in that and carry that as the individuals that we are. And what some of us, I think, tend to do is get a little bit too much into the woo-woo, and we start talking to regular clients about channeling, or which is just as strange to the average person as starting to talk about prayer in a regular meeting. You know, if you're sitting with clients and you're starting to talk about, oh, let's sit here and pray, that's going to make people just as uncomfortable as saying, ooh, let's sit here and channel.
Well, that goes back to, you just brought up a really good point. That is going back to know your clients. Like,
Yes.
I don't go around telling my clients I'm intuitive or that I'm psychic or any of that. Although I am very intuitive and some of my clients know my gifts, I don't go around broadcasting that. Oh, I guess I'm broadcasting that here and now. However, you know, what I'm saying is I don't go around doing that. My clients that know that of me, they know that's who I am.
Yeah.
And again, it's like you have to get to know your clients. Know what clients and what language you have to use. When I'm talking to my clients that are more very business-oriented or lawyers or doctors, what have you, I'm using different language until I get to know them, and I'm looking at their body language, I'm looking at their eyes, I'm really listening with everything. I'm listening with my eyes, I'm listening with my ears, I'm watching their body language. And as I get to know them, I can now know what words I can use. There are certain clients I can use the word energy. There are certain clients I can use the word chakras. There are certain clients I can't even go near those words. So you have to know your clients. You have to know your audience. You have to know who you're talking to. And I don't know how many coaches I run into time and time again that don't know that. They're like, I only want this type of clientele. Well, then you're going to have a very narrow business or very narrow focus. And you know what? I get bored really fast. You know me. For me, I like having a very diverse clientele because for me, that's fun. I don't want just this type of population. I like this type of population because I get to have more fun. I get to play more. I get to play with my clientele that are a lot more spiritual. I get to play with my business clientele because my mind likes to be challenged. So I like having the different type of people. I would go crazy if I was just with the more spiritual-minded people because they're a little bit more challenging, right? And then I get to use my business mind. I get to put my business hat on and really dive into the business world, right? And then when I'm dealing with my more health-oriented people, then I get to put on my health hat, so to speak. Now, mind you, they kind of all cross because we all kind of talk about a little bit of everything with all of them. However, I like that. So I have to put on my all-seeing hat, if you will, and tap into what words I can use with each one of them. And that takes tuning in and looking at their body language. And, of course, it takes a really good intake form, which I'm asking really good questions. And I'll actually ask, if you're more of the physical person, or are you more Western, or are you more Eastern, are you more metaphysical? I'll ask all these questions so I know, so that I can use different words. But you have to know your clients.
Yeah. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make is they get so passionate about what their message is, they're not listening to what the client's needs are and relating to the client in the way that the client needs to be heard. Because ultimately, as messengers and as healers or whatever our gifts are, we're here to be of service. So the person our client isn't there to serve us, we're here to serve them. So we need to be able to listen to what they are saying and communicate with them where they are.
So what you just said there was everything. We need to meet people where they're at. We're here to serve them. They're not here to serve us. So I love that you just said that because it's so important. We need to meet people where they're at. So thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's such a big one. So many people forget that. Absolutely amazing how many people forget to say that. You're just like, we're not here for them. If they're here for, they're not here for us. We are here to serve them. Customer service, number one, customer service 101.
I think what happens with a lot of people is, spiritual people as well, because we're so excited about these gifts that we have, we want to share them with the whole world because it's very exciting to have these gifts that are just now being recognized as a lot of what we're doing, 100 years ago, women would have been murdered for using. So the fact that we're at a place where we can use our gifts our spiritual gifts of healing, which are innately part of what it is to be a woman, our intuition, our psychic abilities. We're really, really excited to be able to share these with people. Yet we still need to understand who the client is and reserve our enthusiasm for what we have for where the client is and use it to its greatest potential with that client.
The other thing I want to add to that, because something you just said, our psychic abilities, I also want to add to that is that everybody is psychic. The only difference between us or them is that you and I and other healers and teachers is that we've gone the extra step to develop them more because we've been really excited about them. So we've studied, we went and got our Reiki certifications or our integrated energy therapy certifications, or we went and studied interfaith ordained ministry. In other words, we went and pursued more about it because we were really excited. Like you said, we got really passionate about it. We started feeling things that we didn't really understand, so we wanted to find out more. That's the only difference, that we actually went to develop it more. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that we're not all psychic. The only difference between us or them we're all interconnected. It's just that some people have chosen to develop it more because they got curious about it. That's the only difference. And some people believe it and some don't. That's the other difference. Some people don't believe in intuition or psychic abilities at all and want nothing to do with it. And some people absolutely feel it, absolutely believe it, and they've chosen to develop it. That's the main difference. And wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, I think it's a little bit more to it than that. I think that every one of us comes to this physical experience with different gifts. Every single one of us, I agree, is intuitive because every one of us has the ability to connect directly with Source, our higher self. So every one of us are born with this gut feeling, this inner guidance system. Every one of us. That I do agree with. However, I would take that a little bit further and say that some of us have certain gifts and propensities that we're born with. I have to tell you, I do not have a gift for sports. Some people are born with what I call athletic intelligence. Some people are born with a really high IQ. Some people are born with really high, what I call spiritual IQ. Some people are born with a really high emotional IQ. So we all have these gifts that we bring with us when we're born. So some of these gifts, I think that the psychic abilities, the healing abilities, I think those are more gifts that people have, natural propensities they have, and that is precisely why we feel the need, the desire to go learn more about them, because it's something that calls to us. It's a gift that we're born with. And I think every person is born with the ability to connect, like I said, with intuition, because we all have that. But I think some of the other gifts are actually gifts that came with us, and that we are here on the planet to heal a lot of what's happened on the planet, as that's just who we are. So anyway, that's my idea.
I agree with that. I'm just saying that we all have different, like you said, we all have different abilities. And then once we find out those abilities, everybody takes whatever those abilities are and then develops those abilities. Correct. And yes, within the psychic abilities, there are more auditory, more kinesthetic, more visual. That's a whole nother conversation. We can, that's a Pandora's box of conversations. But anyways, yes, there are within that more developed skills within that. And within all the other skills that you were talking about, if you are more athletic or more mind, again, that goes into the mind, body, business, spirit, if you will, because within those categories, there's even more gifts within that. Like, a savant, or even within autism, or between rainbow children, crystal children. That's a whole nother episode.
Right.
That's like a whole Pandora's box. Yeah, it's really funny. I know a lot of people think even in autism is like a horrible thing to be autistic. However, there's some actually amazing things that even happens within autism. Savants are within autism, savants are just amazingly, some of them are just brilliant children.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is it a curse or is it a gift? Who are we to say? Right. I think there's a lot to be learned within that. So yeah.
And we may discover that they are incredibly gifted children because it's something that we still are trying to understand.
Exactly. Well, no, I would say that why I said no right there is because I really do believe that they are incredibly gifted children. Some of the savants are just absolutely out of this world. Some of the autistic children, some of their skills are just absolutely surreal. I mean, amazing beyond painters that, can speak languages that, math skills. I'm just absolutely amazing. So
Yeah. Yeah. What I
absolutely
think, I've
amazing.
seen that too. Very, very, very talented and very intuitive people. I think what happens is that they shut down a lot of the unnecessary um, stimulation that they don't need. They just zone right into what their gifts are, and they don't need all the other stimulation that the rest of us need. So, incredibly gifted people. I've heard that. I've also heard that they, of course, we're going off on a whole other subject, but yeah, I don't think autism is quite the curse that people say that it is.
Absolutely. Welcome back, Victoria.
Glad to be here.
So we are going to end here right now, and I would like to wrap up with a few points. So what would be some key points that you would like to distinguish with religion and spirituality?
Well, I would say the biggest difference is that religion is dogma. Religion has all of these rules, and spirituality is the actual experience of spirit. So that's why we have so many different religions. Spirituality is universal. When we have religion, are all of the different schools, if you will, all of the different classes, and each one of those has its own rules of how to access spirituality or how we're supposed to act. So the difference really for me is spirituality is the energetic experience of how we move through life, and religion is the rules. So.
And what would be some tips you can give to people on how they can get past, in other words, beating themselves up? So a lot of people actually go through a lot of guilt with religion. So what are some tools we can leave with people on how not to feel guilty about religion and how to actually embrace spirituality, if you will?
Wow, religion does leave a lot of people with some very, very hurtful things. Guilt, shame, resentment, all of that. It's an incredible amount of deprogramming that a lot of us have to go through in order to get to the core spirit that's inside of us. That core energy that's inside of us is unconditional love. And most of us can't access that because we have built so much shame and guilt around what we think love is, based on all the fear-based beliefs that we've been taught. So for me, finding that love, that light that's inside of every one of us, involves really rethinking everything we think we know, and understanding that leaving religion behind doesn't mean leaving God behind. In a sense, we still have that connection to spirit, but we don't need all of those rules that were created for toddlers, in a sense, in our collective evolution. That a lot of the stories that religion has taught us are intended to keep us in fear, and that there is a process of going through all of those beliefs and finding which ones do and don't resonate with us. There's absolutely no reason to feel guilty about following your own path.
Wouldn't you say, the grief, the 5 stages of death. I always find most people think that we only go through the 5 stages of grieving when people die. And what I have found through a lot of my studies and the study of psychology and theology and philosophy is that we don't just go through the stages when someone passes away. We go through those stages when we lose a limb. We go through the stages when we go through a divorce. We go through the stages when we lose a job. We go through stages through all sorts of things. And I actually have found that people actually, when I've worked with people who've been abused, or someone who's actually come out of a cult, or someone's actually gone through some of what you're talking about here, through guilt, fear, shame, they actually go through the same stages. It's a loss. Anytime we go through any sort of loss, we actually go through the 5 stages of loss, which is, or actually the 5 stages of a death. So it's the same. In other words, the 5 stages of grief is the same thing. So I think that is a tool that people might want to look into. If you're going through where you want to separate from your church or that kind of dogma, you might want to get a book on death and dying. And you'll be surprised if you actually read that, the tools that are in some of these books, you can actually apply to the same thing. It's amazing that most people don't get that we go through the same stages.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
I never thought of that. But
yeah.
in looking at my own experience,
Yep.
It's exactly the same thing. I went through all of those same 5 stages before I came to the stage of acceptance.
Yeah, I work with a lot of clients, and I had a client just got diagnosed with something. And that's the other thing, we don't get that when people get handed a diagnosis of cancer, or whether it could be a liver disease, something's not even terminal, just any sort of disease. Whenever we get impacted with anything, like I said, divorce, lose a friend, lose a job, anything that's a traumatic incident, we go through the 5 stages.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't get that. It's like every time I go through a surgery and I lose a limb or a joint, not even losing a limb, I lose a joint. When I went through my hysterectomy, I lost another ovary. Like right now, I'm losing my shoulder and they're replacing it with something else, right? Every time we go through the same stages, it's like my body knows that that joint is being replaced, and it's grieving for the loss of my joint. In other words, even though it's a mechanical joint being put in there, it knows my physical thing, my physical body, is losing another part of me.
Right.
And so I actually will feel that loss. And I have to go through the whole thing all over again. I get a little bit depressed, and and it's funny. So I'm used to it by now because I know I'm going to go through the whole thing, and I'm get the phantom pains. And people don't get that. Even when you don't lose I can't explain this. Even when I don't lose like a limb, like an amputation, like a normal human being, I still get phantom pains. I still get phantom pains from my ovaries being gone and my uterus being gone, all these different things. We still go through the same thing. Phantom pains are an amazing, I can't even begin to tell you how it feels, but it is truly amazing. Yeah, but we do. It's an amazing whole process of going through those stages. And I found that tool to be very cathartic for people. And I told people, there's tons of books out there. There's so many of them. It is a fabulous tool, though.
That is really, really great to know. And maybe someone needs to write a book on recovering from religion in the 5 stages. There probably are a few.
I'm actually working on something like that. I'm working on a course because too many people, all my clients are like, oh my God, I never thought of that. Oh my God, you got to do that. You got to do that. So I'm working on a course right now on that because I've had too many of my clients go, I've never, ever thought about that. Everyone only correlates that with someone who's passed away.
Right.
No one ever has correlated those stages with everyday normal things. They're just like, huh? What? And I have a client that's going through that right now, and she's like, "Oh my God, I never thought of that." So yeah, it's just pretty amazing. I love psychology because psychology is an amazing. Our brains are just an amazing tool, and when we go through something that's not a death, and your body starts reacting, it's amazing how those things just apply across the board in so many areas. It's just fabulous. I love psychology. I love the human brain. It's just, I don't know. It's amazing.
Yeah, you can see how those 5 stages apply to any kind of transition in your life. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It really does. So is there anything else that you just really feel passionate about sharing when it comes to, because you've had a very interesting story. I'd love actually, I really love, and a lot of people don't know actually what you've kind of been through. I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit about your Mormon, your actual, a little bit of your background of, how you grew up, and because you sort of touched upon it, but you really didn't. And I think it'd be really interesting for people to know, why we're actually having this discussion versus religion versus spirituality.
Okay. Well, I was born into a fundamentalist Mormon, for lack of a better word, cults. It was a very, very small community in Montana. And first I need to explain there's a huge difference between Mormonism and fundamentalist Mormonism. A lot of people get these two confused. Mormonism is it's a mainstream church that you see pretty much all over the place. Fundamentalist Mormonism is what the Mormon church taught 200 years ago when the Mormon church was first established. It's very, very fundamentalist, for lack of a better word. The belief that women are subservient to men. They believe in polygamy, that women can't go to heaven unless a man deems her worthy of going to heaven. Women can't go to heaven unless her husband marries at least 2 other women. That men are the head of the household and that women have to do everything that their husbands say. Women are subservient to their priesthood elders. It's It's a very, very hurtful religion for women. And what I believe is that when we don't honor women, women can't teach their children. So these are practices and beliefs and practices that keep being repeated through generations, because at first, it's when we attack women, we attack their children, so to speak. So I was raised with all these very, very hurtful beliefs. And as a result, because I was raised in this environment where girls and women had no voice, I was raped, I was molested, and I had absolutely no self-esteem. So when I was 17 years old, I decided that either I needed to kill myself. I literally came very, very close to committing suicide, and the only reason I didn't is because I was afraid of spending eternity in hell. So I was very mad at myself. I didn't even have the courage to kill myself, damn it. So I ended up running away. And I went through, tremendous guilt and tremendous shame for leaving my religion, which was the only way I could possibly go to heaven. Was, they were the only ones who knew the truth about how to get to heaven, and that I was one of God's chosen people. So I had all of that to overcome, and it took me a very, very long time after I left. I was actually suicidal for a long time after I left, because I felt so guilty and felt so ashamed that I had walked away from, I was no longer one of God's chosen people, and that I was going to spend eternity in hell for not being, following the path that I had been told God had predestined for me. So I had to go through probably a lot more deprogramming than your average church-going person, because these beliefs were so deeply ingrained in me from a child. My entire self-worth was dependent on this particular religious belief. So that's where I came from. It took me a very long time. It took me another 25 years for me to find my own truth, which is where I am now, which is this beautiful space of knowing who I am and why I'm here and what my connection to spirit is for me. And outside of religion, it's beautiful. There's no fear at all. So
I'm so proud of you. You're just amazing. I love you. So anyways, I'm just so thrilled that you came to join me, and I want everyone to know where they can find Miss Beautiful Victoria. So you can reach Victoria at victoriamreynolds.com. That is VictoriaMreynolds.com. And you can reach me at CarlyAlyssaThorne.com. And you've been here at intentionradio.com, and I am airing every Thursday night Pacific Standard Time from 7 to 8 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us. As usual, I love bringing you valuable content. If there's anything you'd love to hear about, please feel free to let me know. I love bringing you content that you like to hear. I love your feedback, like I said, so please be sure to leave us some. And as usual, I leave you for tonight, and I'll be back with you soon. So have a wonderful night, everybody.